My girlfriend can be very emotionally unstable at times. I
Mm.
don't blame her for it or love her any less for it, but I worry about that it might be a red flag. What are some red flags relating to emotional maturity and if somebody will be a good parent?
Well, one is the measure of how they handle stress, because honestly, singleness doesn't have a lot of stress. I mean, it does. I mean, believe me, there's stress of, can I find the right person? And I've been having to work all these hours and I've got to pay off these student loans. I mean, stress does exist. But pay attention to those pain points. Pay attention to how they handle rush hour traffic, disappointment, frustration with the boss at work, how they interact with colleagues in the workplace, family dynamics. Like, pay real close attention to this stuff, because a lot of them, let's say they never really developed any conflict resolution skills and they just kind of have an emotional meltdown when they don't get their way. Well, if that's how they're behaving when they're single, I mean, marriage is going to set that on fire. I mean, marriage is going to bring all this stuff up to the surface. It's going to be
Everything.
lighter fluid to this stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes a person has an affective maturity level of a child. And, if virtue is the ability to control your impulses. And if the person has no impulse control when they're single, then when they're sleep deprived in marriage, and they've got the stress of the kids and everything else going on, I think your life is going to be miserable, to be honest with you. I remember one priest saying, look, if you marry Miss Universe, but she doesn't have virtue, you're going to have a miserable existence. But if you marry a woman that does possess virtue, like, you're going to be happy. You will actually have a happy life. Because virtue, that capacity to know how to treat a person with love, to have self-control, to have patience, to have all these qualities, I mean, you need that stuff to have a functional marriage. So this is a gigantic red flag. So what I want you to do is do not move forward in that relationship until you could look God in the eyes and say, I'm at peace if this person never changes. I am totally fine with my kids being raised in an environment like this. And if you're totally at peace, hey, go forward with that. But be honest with yourself and be honest with God, because you're not just choosing for yourself, you're choosing for your children as well. And so a lot of people, I think, don't have enough self-respect to get out of a toxic relationship for love of themselves. But I think if you start thinking the love of your children, then sometimes you're able to make a difficult decision and tell the person, I think it's not time for us to move forward. I think you might need some help to be able to manage some of these hurts. There's a book by Dr. Conrad Bars and True, I think it was the other author's name, called Healing the Unaffirmed, Recognizing Deprivation Neurosis. And it was a book that we had to read in counseling when I was at college, but it was a really interesting kind of expose on how you have grown-ups, like at a Little League game, having a complete emotional meltdown, like just throwing chairs. And it's like, dude, are you 3? And the answer is like, yeah, that they are 3 emotionally. That there was a certain lack of affirmation that didn't kind of get met, and their emotional growth kind of stopped there. And physically they grew, intellectually they grew, but emotionally they didn't. And he talks about how to recognize that and long-term how to heal that. So that one's called Recognizing Deprivation Neurosis, like healing the unaffirmed. So it's a really good book rooted in Thomistic anthropology, something you might want to check out. Any other thoughts in terms of emotional instability for a male or a female that you might be dating?
I think it's a massive red flag. And I think you need to be very, very cautious and thinking that, oh, well, once we're married, or the situation just is too much for them, or if you're constantly having to make up excuses on why it was okay, and then also how often, I think you already know the answer. And just to be honest about that, and if it's happening often, then I honestly think it's even just a waste of your time, because this person is not emotionally stable and life is unstable. There's always things that are going to be happening constantly. And if this person is emotionally unstable, and when life gets hard, what do you think is going to happen every single time? And you don't want that kind of a life to look forward to, right?
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
How awful that would be.
Yeah, I think that would be obviously certainly rough. So what you could do in the meantime is, one, try to keep the relationship as pure as possible, because the more you get too physically and emotionally enmeshed with each other, the harder it is to kind of pull away and objectively look at the situation. Because sometimes you get so hung up on who you thought they were or who you hope they'll be that you literally become blind to who they actually are. So make sure you're not making a project out of this person saying, yeah, I'd really love to be with this person if they were totally different. I think they would just be awesome. And so I think they'll get totally different. It just might take, a couple centuries. It's like, no. Are you happy now? Are you really happy? And I think no. What is the immediate answer that comes to your mind as soon as you're asked that question? It's like, no, I'm not at peace. And if you need to convince yourself more of that, dude, just start writing a calendar. This is what happened on Tuesday. This is what happened on Wednesday. Thursday, this happened. Because you can argue with your memory, but you can't argue with your handwriting. And so look at that and be like, okay, if it's the best indication of the future of a relationship of the past, and if the past is an absolute soap opera, roller coaster, absolute mess, I think you'd be naive to expect things to just change because, this will happen. And this is why she's so on edge. And once this goes away, it's always going to be a new excuse, like Crystal said. And so don't pay attention to the future. Don't pay attention to future faking and kind of breadcrumbing, like where they kind of give you a nugget here and there, a piece, and it just makes you so hungry for more that you stick around until they throw you another bone. That's not thriving. That's just surviving. That's wilderness survival in a dating relationship. And it's not supposed to look like that. So
also, how are they self-medicating? If they have anger, a lot of the times they have serious deep wounds and there's some sort of like abuse. If you really pay attention, if it's drinking, if it's pills, if it's, I don't know, but there's some sort of a self-medicating going on to kind of pacify and to kind of overlook or ignore the emotional problems and where it's stemming from. So also be on the lookout for that, because that's another thing that is a serious red flag. And they're just having a good time, or we just do this, or we're always doing that. But it's like, well, how often? And is it something they need in order to be the person you want to date?
Yeah. And people who cannot or choose not to control themselves will seek to control others. And so see if she's trying to control you, to blame you for why she can't control herself. And she's trying to manipulate particular situations to get you to do this or that. And if you don't fall lockstep in line with what she wants, well, then that's why she had the meltdown. It's like, it's just such an unhealthy dynamic. And so whether you're dating a guy or a girl and these tendencies are going on, I would say you meet very few people who walk away from a relationship like that and regret it. But you meet a lot of people who stay put and do regret it, because not only does it not get better, unfortunately, oftentimes it gets worse. Hey, if you enjoyed that clip, I'd encourage you to please like, subscribe, share, comment. That helps show it to more people. And then also submit your question at the email live@chastity.com, or submit your question or call in through our Discord server so we can talk to you in person on our next show.